Growth in Brazil is also boosting that country's billionaires list. Maria Bartiromo caught up with one of the most powerful men in Brazil, whose assets in mining and energy has him vowing to become the richest man in the world. Maria?
Thanks so much. Well, we are just back from Brazil, and Eike Batista is the richest man in Brazil. He is the 8th wealthiest person in the world today, with a net worth of more than $30 billion. Through EBX, Batista's holding company, this gentleman controls businesses in mining, shipbuilding, energy, logistics, tourism, and entertainment. Batista founded 5 companies, and he told me he's looking to list his companies globally on other exchanges beyond the Bovespa in Brazil. 2/3 of Batista's fortune comes from OGX. OGX is the oil and gas exploration company that he founded in 2007. He took that company public a year later. That wealth will likely increase of OGX, given the huge oil find recently on the offshores of Brazil. We talked about that this week.
This is really a gigantic driver because Brazil has moved from 50 billion barrels of oil reserves to 100. So we moved from the 16th position, or very low position, into literally the 3rd, 4th position in terms of oil reserve in the world, and it's probably bigger.
Let me ask you more about that, because your company is helping to produce this huge oil find on the offshore of Brazil.
Yes.
How big of an opportunity is this? Someone said to me the other day they believe Brazil will eventually move from being an oil importer to an oil exporter. It's totally self-sufficient.
Yes, we are self-sufficient today, but so we produce around 2 million barrels a day. Brazil will grow from 2 million to 6 million barrels by 2020. Our company, approximately 1.4 million barrels, Petrobras another 2 million, and the foreign companies 600,000 a million barrels a day. So in total, 6 million barrels. If you come today, Saudi Arabia is producing around 10 million barrels. So with 6 million, we'll be hovering between position 2nd and 3rd.
What about the issue of shale? Everyone's talking about that there's so much shale in the world today. Doesn't that mean that oil prices should be a lot lower if there's so much shale?
No, because see, if you see the world energy consumption or discovery per capita has been, in the last 50 years, oil energy discoveries have doubled only, while the consumption for people who've just entered the consumer life, okay, have, for instance, for military purpose per capita consumption has increased by 50 times. If we have to drill 5,000 meters down in the ocean for oil, it shows you that we have tapped all easy and existing resources. So the famous peak oil situation, we are there. We are so. And if you look at macro numbers, the world car fleet is today around 750 million cars. It's growing to 2 billion cars in the next 15 years. Yes, many of them are going to be electric and hybrid, but most of them not. So they still need the gasoline. And
one of the ways that you've been so successful, of course, is you're a low-cost producer. Talk to us about this. You're producing oil at $18 a barrel?
Yes, the difference between us is really being in the shallow waters of Brazil. So shallow waters implies low-cost production, which is spectacular. I mean, we have, if oil is today at 120, $18 is an 85% EBITDA margin. Yes.
That's a pretty good margin.
We call it idiot-proof assets.
Idiot-proof assets.
Idiot-proof assets.
And it's the same thing with coal. It's the same thing with gold.
Yes. We have focused our businesses in these huge assets. Countries like Brazil and Colombia have allowed the private sector to own national oil company or resource company assets. See, this is something that people have to understand. So, the taxation, the government take is very reasonable. In Brazil, the government take is 52%. In Angola, which is in Africa, is 85%. So it's really wealth creation for our shareholders. Respect to contracts, right to law, and everything that you have acquired today is grandfathered. Let's say whatever assets my company have, what I have today in my mining company, my oil company, there are concessions that, for instance, in oil, they last for 28 years. They are grandfathered. This is very important. The government will not change the rules on what I already have. I think for investors it's very important. They may change the rules going forward, increase taxes, royalties, but what I have today, I have today. It's very important.
This is a subject that everyone's talking about because now you've got President Dilma and she's saying, hey, the real has gotten out of control. It's soaring in value. Inflation is a major concern.
Yes.
So they're instituting policies that are actually taxing foreign capital, taxing short-term money, so-called hot money. Do you worry that that's going to limit the amount of new money coming in?
Listen, thanks God we have Dilma running our country today because she wants to, President Lula's legacy was to keep inflation under control because during his 8 years, the Brazilian worker had a 40% increase in his purchase power. So inflation control was crucial because before I know the inflation eroded the purchase power of the Brazilian worker. So the 40% increase in real terms, which allowed the disposable income to be there, and this incredible growth of Brazilian economy. So she will preserve this legacy of keeping inflation under control. So that's why interest rates are at 13%. So we are a country that its inflation is demand-driven. The reason why we have to increase, use normal monetary tools, okay, raise the interest rates, it's unique in the world because we have a demand-driven economy. She has to cool it down with high interest. So because there are bottlenecks in infrastructure, things that we explain, to basically, after maybe 3 years from now, we'll be able to start growing above 5-6% again if we de-bottleneck the country.
Let me ask you about security, Ike, because this is one issue that people are talking about in Brazil as still being very challenging, crime and security. Where are we on that front in Brazil?
When President Lula came into power in 2002, we had 12% unemployment. Brazil is running 6.2% unemployment. This for Brazil means almost full employment. Well, you know what, when people are employed, they have a job, they don't need to do silly things. So there's a dramatic change in that security area, and Rio has tackled it with the occupation of the pacification police of the slums, which is a gigantic success.
We know that there's an enormous amount of money moving into Brazil. What's behind this boom?
Brazil is a country of 200 million people. We're a melting pot of nations, very similar to the US. 100 million of these 200 have grown into the middle class. 35 million alone during Lula's presidency, so from 65 million to 100 million Brazilians. So imagine a country with 200 million people. You move 35 million to the middle class, and we are foreseeing that we'll be able to bring another 50 million into the middle class by 2020. So it's a demand-driven growth.
Before I got to Brazil, I knew that the country was very much rich in natural resources. I did not realize the opportunity that you're talking about, the middle class. So many people's fortunes rising.
Very similar to maybe what happened short after the Second World War, in the 60s in America. Very similar.
What are your plans in terms of your companies? Are you looking to list in other exchanges globally?
One way to expose ourselves better is to list outside. So we're going to initially list OGX in London. London is really the mecca for resources. The large resource company in the world list in London, BHP, Rio Tinto, Russian resource companies. So we're going to do this starting with OGX and then all the others.
You said, I think it was the last time that we spoke when you were in New York, you said, look, Warren Buffett, Carlos Slim, they better be looking behind them because I'm on my way there to becoming the richest person in the world. You still feel that way?
I have created 5 companies that have in them embedded resources worth $2 trillion. Okay, at very low cost to produce it. So it's just a question of time. I'm sorry. So Mr. Slim, I don't know if I'm going to pass him on the right side or the left side, but it's going to happen.
But you're going to pass him. How will you get there? Because of these reserves in each of these companies?
Yes, the underlying assets that we have discovered. We have 2.3 trillion. I haven't finished drilling yet. We still have acreage to drill more. We have today, at today's prices, $2.3 trillion worth of assets, underlying assets.
Where are the opportunities?
If you understand the world as a whole, the Chinese have managed to bring the first 400 million Chinese into the consumer world in the last 20 years. If you go to China, you'll see that they're working on bringing the next 400 million people into it. So there's 1 billion people in the world who are going to need to have the first house, plug in the first BlackBerry or whatever electronic instrument, first fridge. So energy consumption, it's steel, it's iron ore, it's fuel. So, you know, the world needs resources.
A lot of people look at shipping and they're saying this is basically the indicator of what's happening in the world today in terms of growth or a slowdown in growth. We know China is trying to slow things down, Brazil trying to slow things down. What can you tell us about shipping today?
We are basically developing a super port. Is a port that receives the largest ships in the world. It's like, you know, imagine moving people from New York to Europe on a 737. Now, ships have grown, and there's a size of ship called the China-Max. It's 360 meters long, 65 meters wide, and it reduces the cost to ship bulk things, oil, iron ore, soybeans, by half from Brazil to China. So scale makes a physical distance an economical distance.
But are you seeing any slowdown in terms of shipping right now? I mean, I look at the shipping index, and that's telling you one story. So are you seeing any slowdown?
No, I mean, listen, the consumption in China is continuing. In Brazil, we're slowing down economies to control inflation, to debottleneck the economy, because inflation is one of the issues. So once we have the infrastructure prepared to produce more cars, produce more, you know, you will let the economy grow again.
What's your biggest concern right now?
My biggest concerns, well, none. Once you engineer assets with state-of-the-art concepts, world-class size, world-class low cost, in the low 20% in your industry, I will not die.
None. Life is good.
Yeah, life is good.